Hi everyone! So let's just dive right into this. Usually I start out with some warm-up sketches. I don't really have something in particular when I'm starting. Usually I'll do a rough figure outline, then I'll begin to form my composition. I'll revise the pose and the proportion so that it makes sense, and then just move it around on the page so it looks right. Then I'm gonna add some foreground elements and some base background elements. Then after I've gotten the main outlines, I want to start hitting them with the detail. I'm constantly questioning my pose and my composition. Usually things aren't completely correct your first time around, so it's always good to revise. I like to imagine the character's life, what they enjoy, what they dislike, little knickknacks that may be lying around. I love everything to look like an I Spy book. Then I reduce the opacity and then begin a clean outline. This is the outline that I'm using to completely style my character and finalize all of the base elements that I have laid out for me. We're going to use the top lines for the end of the drawing, but not the lines under. So try to be as clean as possible with these. And of course, you can toggle back and forth to check the line work. Sometimes it looks a little bit different if you keep the base layer on the entire time, so toggling can really help refine your technique. You want to make sure with an outline that every mark means something, that you don't just have scribbles in one area, because you'll be able to see that it'll clutter up the composition. So take this opportunity to research particular items or plant life or anatomy. If something doesn't look right or you're not having the right kind of mental image, there's nothing wrong with looking at a reference just to double check that your shapes mimic the form of the shape you're trying to accomplish, if that makes sense. I think I did this when I was in New Orleans, so I didn't have my actual closet to reference. Next, you want to go in with base colors. So start with a neutral background and then add colors on top of it. You want to establish a mood and then use your color palette to support that mood. So for this particular work, I'm trying to have kind of an earthy, bohemian kind of feel to it. So I'm starting with beiges, grays, dark reds, kind of pale muted greens. And usually it's really nice to establish that neutral base color, because when you start with white, it's easy to oversaturate your palette. At least from what I've experienced, it's usually a little easier to go that direction. If that's your style, that's totally fine. But I usually have found that I can access different kinds of styles by just revising the base palette of my work and then adding my shadows and highlights from there, because the context of all of the colors is completely different when you're on top of a beige or a gray instead of a white. That's also something I learned when I was in college for oil painting as well. We would usually start with a brown or a reddish base layer first and then paint on top of it that way. Next, establish your light source and make sure that it makes sense. So imagine, where's your sun, where's your lamp, your fireflies, whatever you have going on. And then kind of imagine where the light would hit on all of your objects, what's in front of the light, what's behind the light, where it can push through, and revise your image from there. Allow that light to reflect through everything it touches. Essentially, if you hold a red ball up to a white wall and there's light touching the red ball, that color will actually reflect onto the white wall. I think it's called reflective color or something like that, but that's very useful as well. Then you want to go in by including the shadows cast by certain elements. So if my light's behind me, my shadow's going to be in front of me. If you need to use an object to kind of mimic that form and that light and shadow, you can always do this on a small scale with a lighter or a tennis ball or something like that, and move the light around to see how the shadow changes based off of where the light is. Light doesn't have to just mean lighter. I may change this later in my drawing, but it can have a different vibrancy and a color. Then at the side part of my drawing, I actually have a tank of water because I always wanted to have a tank of water in my room. Water just looks so cool, so this is me fabricating it, my dreams through my drawings. So it's really cool to see how light interacts with water and vice versa. You can also try bumping up the saturation of something in a generally unsaturated area to add a little bit of, bump and flavor to your palette. I also really enjoy messing with an isolated texture, kind of like that effect from like Chowder, the show, when they'd walk around but the texture would stay the same behind them. I always enjoyed stuff like that. And if you'd like, I can add tutorials later on how I utilize texture and make the background clean. I also like to keep each object's value in mind so that each section of objects, even though their colors may be different, their shadows may be different, it's still one grouping, which adds to the composition. Then afterwards, usually I like messing with large patches of darkness or light to bring attention to a certain point. So usually I do like a vignette effect or something like that. But yeah, after you finalize all that, then your painting, your digital image should pretty much be complete. So hopefully this was packed with enough information to keep y'all going, and definitely if you create a piece of art using this, send me a message and I'll be sure to check it out. Well, I hope this helped y'all. Happy painting and have a great day.